Hello, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Wayne.
Hi, Ashley. So good to see you.
So good to see you.
Damn this quarantine 2020.
It's definitely teaching me how to get comfortable with any type of video chat. I was never a big FaceTimer or anything like that, but now it's all the time.
I have to say that you and I are very similar in that way, many ways, but we're very similar in that way. It's distracting for me, and I find myself looking at me and critiquing myself throughout the whole conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. The whole time I'm trying to listen to you or whomever I'm talking to, and I'm really just thinking, why are you making that face? God, is that what
Yeah.
you really look like? That sort of thing.
Yep. I feel the
Yes.
same way.
Yes. But
Cheers to that.
I am grateful for these modern technologies because they do allow us the opportunity to at least virtually get together and have a conversation about the dark side of the rainbow,
That's
right?
exactly right.
All right, so welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the Kings, Queens, and Folks to another episode of Who Are We Again, Ashley?
We are the Slay Queens podcast.
That we are. We are, in fact. So I think we can probably get started in the way that we traditionally get started, or as Ashley likes to say,
Per usual.
per usual. We can start with some shout outs and then move on to some sources and then talk about true crime.
Let's
I'll
do it.
start. There were just so many. I'm so appreciative of the people who engage with us on Twitter and the people who shout us out and recognize us and suggest us to other listeners and suggest us on other platforms. I am so appreciative of that. There are kind of too many to even name. So thank you all so much for that, for all the love that we've gotten on Twitter. There's been a lot of it recently, and we are just so humbled by it. Thank you so much. And
Thank
now,
you.
Ashley?
We just had one rate and review on Apple Podcast, which was really sweet. The person gave us, 5 stars and said, really like this podcast overall, great energy and interesting information, which I mean, that's essentially all I really want to hear back, right?
That's the
I
most
like
important
listening.
information. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there a screen name so that we can give them a proper shout out?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I totally skipped over that part. This person would be at Clojo.
All right. So
So
thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, and I do believe that that screen name is also one of our followers on Instagram, at least maybe some other platforms, but definitely Instagram. So thank you so much. We
We
hope
love the support.
yes, and we hope you continue to enjoy what we're putting out, even though times have been difficult. We are still trying to put out content to everybody. So, shall we?
We shall.
All right. I think we probably have the same sources for this one.
Yeah.
Not because I'm reading your mind or anything, but because there's just such limited information about this case. But I really felt like it was an important one to tell, and one that I thought that the listeners would enjoy.
Yes.
So
I'm going to say the same, yeah.
Yeah. Did you want me to cite that source, or how do you want to go about it?
You can go ahead. You can go ahead.
Okay. The information contained within our episode today will be heavily cited from a publication by a woman named Julianne Loeffler. And that was an article that she published on BuzzFeedNews.com. Excuse me, I'm sorry. This is due in large part to, as we said, the scarce information that we could find regarding this case, as well as really the exceptional work that she did researching and telling this tale. This story of what she is quoted as calling a sweeping harassment campaign. We've chosen to move forward with this information that is available to us, though it's limited because we just really want the story to be told.
Yeah, it's really, like I told you before we started recording, it's even more interesting once you start learning about it. Like, it sounds like an interesting case, and then like you start reading this article and you're just like, you're into it, man.
Yeah. Absolutely. And kind of a little bit of a confession before we go any further with it. I know I have been, and I think that just based in conversation, you have also been listening a good bit to the Strictly Stalking podcast.
Yes, very much. I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah.
So we're like on this tangent now together.
Yeah. So shout out to them. I really love what they're doing. I really love just their podcast in general, and having just really developed an appreciation for their podcast and their work. Ashley and I were kind of inspired to seek out a stalking case that was specific to the LGBTQ community. And though there are quite a few out there that will touch on kind of a stalking aspect of the true crime, I couldn't find one that was kind of, I hate to sound silly here, that was strictly stalking. There was always like stalking that led to something else, that led to a murder.
Sure.
And that kind of defeated the purpose of trying to find a case that was just about stalking. So that's why we kind of chose this one, or at least that's why I wanted to do this one. And you kindly agreed that you were also on board with that. So thank you so much.
Well, I just love doing different cases in general, and both, we've both been on kind of like the stalking kick and thinking, there's got to be so many cases out there that we have never heard of, because it's not really an avenue, you or I have really gone down before in the true crime world. So in you finding this article, I liked, number one, that it was completely different, and number two, that it's, a pretty active thing right now. Like, it was very recently that all of this has been going on.
Definitely. And also, we have said in the past that though we do traditionally end up covering a lot of cases that are that feature murders and serial killers and whatnot, this is not a murder podcast, and it's not a serial killer podcast. It's a true crime podcast, which very much includes stalking victims.
Absolutely. True crime encompasses a lot more than just murder. And it's fascinating too. It's just as fascinating when you're looking into these cases.
It is. It absolutely is. And oftentimes we see what begins as like a stalking situation evolve into something else. So
sure.
Yeah, so it's good to know about these cases as well, and kind of see some of the maybe red flags and warning signs.
Yeah, right, for sure. We're arming ourselves with knowledge. Again, this is a different way. Not everyone is going to try to murder you. They might stalk you. They might try to mug you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's all other true crime out there we got to pay attention to. Yeah. Not just murder, you guys and gals and folks.
And everyone in between.
And everyone in between.
All right. Should we get started?
Yes, we shall.
All right. Let's talk about April 18th of 2016. So like you said, this is really recent compared to a lot of the cases that we talk about, or even other true crime podcasts. Mm-hmm. A gentleman by the name of Max O walked down the hall at his high school in Bremen, which is a mid-sized city in northern Germany. He opened the glass door of a small office and saw a white cardboard box on the table, and it was addressed to him. The school's director, a teacher, and a police officer were all present, standing next to the box. Contained within it was a funeral wreath with black and dark red roses, as well as a white angel made of faux marble. So somebody put a little bit of time and effort into this.
Like, it's creepy and ominous already.
Yeah. Okay, so attached was a printed card which read, quote, "We mourn the loss of Max O." The men in the room said things to him like, quote, "evidence" and, quote, "death threat." But by this point, Max had already tuned them out. In an interview with BuzzFeed News, I'm going to stumble over that one apparently a few times. BuzzFeed News. Max recalls the thoughts that were racing through his mind as, what is all this? What does it mean? What's going on? What am I supposed to do? And then back in class, he didn't tell anyone what had just happened because Max was only 17 years old.
Yeah. And what do you do when you're a teenager? You shut the fuck up about it. You're like, I don't know what to do, so I'm just not going to say anything.
And as we will further discuss, there were some other factors. There were some other reasons why he was hesitant to talk about this and tell people what all was going on with him. But that's where we start our story. Do you have anything to add to that so far, Ashley?
No, other than This is probably one of the creepiest like beginnings to a story that I've ever read. Like it's, you know, it's different when you're watching a TV show where there's, you know, certain scenes that happen. You're like, ooh, imagine that happening. But like, this is something that would happen in a TV show, and it's real life for this kid, you know?
That's why I think I'm always so fascinated by true crime and watching like horror films and scary TV shows and suspenseful things like that. I can always explain it away. I can always go, well, I mean, this is make believe. This is make believe.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
fiction. But true crime, it intrigues and freaks me out in that way that keeps me coming back for more, because I can always remind myself, this is true. This happened.
Yeah, this is actually happening. Yeah.
This is reality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So again, Max was in Germany. And let's talk about hate crimes in Germany, just really quick to give you a little bit of a background as to why Max maybe even was afraid with regard to that aspect to speak up.
This is just mind-blowing as well.
It's mind-blowing and it's disgusting, and it baffles me because, again, we're talking about 2016.
Exactly, that's the thing.
Ago.
I kept having to go back and like recheck the time, because I'm like, am I really reading this happening? Like these years are actually happening very, very recently. Like it just, I can't even speak about it.
When it seems like it's something that should have been happening in the 70s and 80s, right?
Precisely, exactly.
Yeah. All right, so Max, whose last name was not published to avoid jeopardizing the ongoing proceedings and to prevent others from targeting him, is one of at least 10 people that the district attorney's office in Bremen presumes to have been stalked and harassed by the same perpetrator. The office is actively investigating at least 4 cases. All the victims are young gay men like Max. The German Federal Ministry of the Interior registered 313 violent crimes against LGBT people in Germany in 2018.
Yeah.
2018.
Well,
They also speculate that the actual figure is estimated to be exponentially higher because experts say these crimes are vastly underreported.
That's exactly why I was like, yeah, well, but hold on. But wait, there's more.
But wait, there's more. At
Which
least
makes sense
potentially
because
more.
we've even talked about this before on the podcast. It doesn't matter what year it is. Plenty of people in the community have felt as though it doesn't matter if I report it, so I'm not going to, because either A, I was a sex worker, or B, I just assume they're not going to care because they haven't cared before. So
yeah, or people like, I mean, even you and I feel like I've had conversations, not on the podcast per se, but you and I just communicating as friends have talked about how we were harassed or discriminated against or treated a certain sort of negative way because of our lifestyles and us living our authentic lives and being our authentic selves. And I know personally, I can say that I chalked it up to, oh, well, that's just part of it. That's just part of my day-to-day life. And that's not the right attitude to have either.
I mean, that's very true. It's a good point. You just get used to it.
You do. You become callous to certain things. All right, so just for comparison, in England and Wales alone, more than 11,000 crimes based on sexual orientation were reported in 2017. 11,000 as opposed to just 313 that were reported in Germany.
Right.
So, come on.
Right.
All right. Hatred towards LGBT people is also part of day-to-day life in Germany, but it receives little attention in German politics and media. This is one of the biggest reasons why Max decided to make his case public. And I respect that so much, because imagine how terrifying it must have been for especially a teenager, or maybe this is years later and now he's late teens, early 20s. Imagine living in an environment that's hostile and unwelcoming towards you as a person who's the LGBTQIA plus community, and coming out very publicly saying, A, this is who I am, B, I was treated poorly because of it, and C, people didn't help me the way that they should have.
I think about things like that constantly when it comes to like certain victims you hear of becoming, you know, public speakers and things like that. I'm just, it's amazing to me, but I always think, I don't think I could do that. Like for me, I compartmentalize things, right? So if something horrible I feel happened of this nature, I'd be like, okay, we're going to put that in a box and we're going to shove it in the back of our heads and we're never going to talk about it again. Okay. But
yeah,
I really, truly do admire, like you said, even, I mean, what this kid went through and the fact that he is barely an adult at the time of, like you said, coming out and telling his story to the world. It's admirable. It really is.
It really is. And it took a degree of strength that I myself, as someone who's twice his age, I'm not sure that I could have shown present day, let alone 17 years at 17 years old. So kudos to him.
Exactly.
All right, let's talk about what else happened to Max. The scope of what all Max experienced is difficult to determine. A 14-page report obtained by, I think I'm going to get it right this time, BuzzFeed News, documents only a fraction of the attacks that occurred over a period spanning about half a year. Max was just another student, someone who didn't really stand out. He was polite and cheerful. He was popular. He liked theater. Shocker, he liked theater. Gay kid liked theater, right? I mean, same girl, I'm not judging.
I am so surprised.
But I think this description just goes to show that he's like so many other just normal kids who lived in that town, who went to that high school, who was a part of that community.
Sure, he was active. He wasn't like this, withdrawn, what's wrong with him teenage boy. He was just a very, for lack of a better term, regular teenage boy.
Exactly, and he wasn't placing himself in situations, he wasn't necessarily living and I hate to use this term, but it's used a lot in these cases and in law enforcement and whatnot. He wasn't, there were no behaviors that were placing him at risk. He wasn't living kind of that like at-risk lifestyle. Just a normal kid, air quotes, normal kid, right? The biggest difference between me and the majority is that I'm gay, Max was later quoted as saying. Then in January of 2016, an acquaintance sent Max a message about an account on Facebook that was pretending to be him. Over the course of weeks and months, Max discovered more and more of these profiles popping up. Some of them pretending to be him, others pretending to be his friends or acquaintances. The suspect used profiles to send Max countless messages threatening and insulting him, threatening his family, contacting his teachers, and spreading rumors accusing Max of stealing, which I thought was particularly interesting.
Yeah, that's odd, right? Like,
just trying to ruin his reputation in general, I guess.
Yeah.
Strangers received death threats from Max's telephone number. The harasser also sold phony soccer tickets, cell phones, festival tickets, and other items on eBay in an account that was created in Max's name. Also, very odd.
How does one think to do something like that, I wonder?
I mean, maybe he's in quarantine and he just sits around and doesn't have anything else going on all day.
Could be, I guess, man.
I agree. It's not something I could ever conceive of, so I really have no idea how.
I mean, it's a genius way to kind of mess with someone, truly, but like, I guess maybe I just don't have that hate in my heart. I mean, I've disliked people plenty. I've thought of slashing tires. Never have I done it,
Yeah, I have totally envisioned the fantasy of me going, I'll carry Underwood on somebody, before you see. But I have yet to do it. So yeah, I can completely understand where you're coming from. All right, so eventually strangers would show up at Max's house and they would show up to Max's school demanding the goods that he had allegedly sold them online. At the time, Max wasn't out in his life as gay. He wasn't out to anybody. But the alleged perpetrator was outing him to his friends, family, and anybody in the community who would listen, including his father and his grandfather.
That's just...
It's horrific. And
it's heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking. And I think he even said in an interview that the thing that upset him the most was that he outed him to his dad and that he didn't have the opportunity to sit his father down and have that conversation with him, which is so important.
Yeah, that's exactly what it said. It said, recently he was quoted as saying, I'm still angry that he outed me to my dad and I never had the chance to tell him about it myself, which that's just, I mean, it just goes to show that that's such a huge thing in someone's life. That's the one thing you're kind of pinpointing out of all of the shit this guy pulled. And that's really the worst part to you. And I can understand that.
Yeah. That may have been, not to necessarily speak for everyone, but I think it's pretty common for gay men to be the most intimidated to come out to their father because they think that their father has this idea of who they should be, this very like masculine, like
Well,
heterosexual,
yeah,
heteronormative person, and it's
right.
most intimidating to come out to the father figure. So don't want to speak for everyone, but I think we see that a lot in young gay men.
Absolutely. And it's, it's just their own fragile masculinity, but it's a thing. And
Yeah, we've
it's a
all dealt
very
with it
real
from time.
thing.
Yeah, we've all dealt with it from time to time.
Absolutely.
The perpetrator, or the alleged perpetrator, also used a picture of Max photoshopped with text saying, "Yes, I'm gay, and that is a good thing." And I mean, not a bad thing.
I mean, at least he's outing him in a positive light.
Yeah, and we'll see. The alleged stalker.
Yeah.
The alleged stalker posted that photo underneath family photos of Max's on Facebook and also printed out copies, used them as flyers to pin them up along the streets of Max's hometown.
Like, what? What?
Insanity to me.
I don't understand. I mean, like, it reminds me of in the first season of the L Word, there's this girl that like Shane hooks up with that like obviously doesn't understand that that's all going to be type of thing. And she truly does. Like, she shows up and like has a microphone in the middle of a bar and she hands out flyers like warning people about Shane. And I'm like, okay, I can see this, but again, that's a TV show.
Yeah.
It was a plot, it wasn't real life.
Yeah.
And part of me wonders if maybe he got this from that show. Maybe he watches too much TV and that's what his problem is.
Maybe he did. All right. In addition to the harassment, Max was also being threatened by his alleged perpetrator. For months, he would told things like, quote, "You are nothing and you should die." At one point, he and his family were even notified by the local newspaper that they had received a request to print Max's obituary, which gave me chills. It was
I forgot about that.
Terrible. Terrible.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about the police's response to what all was happening to this poor boy. Despite everything, Max continued to be active on Facebook throughout 2016. He actually did that in order to document what was happening to himself, his friends, and his family, which is brilliant. Good
Absolutely.
for him. You have to have proof. You have to have a paper trail. Max wanted to find a solution on his own, and he wanted to protect the people around him from being harassed. But who was protecting Max?
That's exactly right.
Who was protecting Max? In spring of 2016, shortly after the incident with the flyers and the posters that had been placed all around town, it all got to be too much for Max. He finally decided to report what was happening to him. Max decided to visit the police station in downtown Bremen, which was a very imposing building of large sand-colored stone and blocks. And I think they threw in that description just to add kind of that extra layer of intimidation for a kid of his age. Imagine being alone, like walking into that building to tell authorities who are probably going to have an issue with the fact that you're a homosexual man saying, "I'm being harassed because I'm a homosexual man." I mean, just it all sounds just very horrific.
It does. It's like you don't know what your response is going to be, and you could just be laughed out.
Yeah. And that's not far from what happened.
Right?
According to Max, he visited the station about 3 times. He said he remembered that the police told him to try to stop going on Facebook so much and not to take what was happening to him too personally, which
in what universe is this not personal?
I think that deserves an old... Completely. Completely.
I love that you brought him out.
Yeah, but you're right. I think this was absolutely their way of blowing it off and not having to deal with it because they didn't prioritize this sort of thing.
They're like, whatever, there are bigger fish to fry.
Exactly. Around May, Max received the only call that the police would place as a follow-up with him, advising that they were going to stop investigating the case at all. And they gave no explanation as to why. Just, hey, we may have looked into this a little bit. I know you've come in 3 times or so to tell us about this thing that's happening to you. We don't think it's that big a deal, and we're not going to waste any more time with it. Deuces. Mic drop.
Like, that's, I can't.
Let's do another.
Well,
That's 3 gallons of bullshit in a 2-gallon bucket.
Legit.
Yes.
Okay.
That's just horrible. And that's, again, that's why we had just talked about before, before starting all of this, how crimes like this go unreported, because obviously this is what happens.
Yeah. And imagine how disappointing that is. Max actually said he thought that he would go there to get help, and he didn't get any help at all.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah. His mother also agreed with that. And in April of 2016, the whole family was involved. The whole family, realizing that he was getting no help and support from any sort of law enforcement agency, decided that they were going to get a private investigator involved. So his father hired a private investigator in April of 2016.
Isn't that wonderful? Because a lot of these cases, I feel we don't have, good parental figures. Yeah. Or maybe the parents don't want to be involved, or they don't believe it too. It's just nice to hear that parents are actually stepping up and figuring this out.
And I love the fact that they mentioned that his father did this specifically, because, we all kind of take what we do personally from this information. But like I said before, I think as young gay men, we're often really intimidated by the idea of coming out to our fathers, and our fathers thinking that we aren't real men, and them having this huge issue with it and not loving us because we didn't turn out to be the son that they wanted, things like that. And I love the fact that they specifically mentioned that the father says, you know what, my boy's not getting any help, and I'm going to do everything that I can for him to help. Yeah. And I don't know, it just reminds me of the Love, Simon moment, not necessarily the film, because I honestly didn't see the film. I read the book instead.
I didn't either. Same.
Yeah, I read the book instead, and I'm told that the book was much better. But at some point in the book, Simon says to his father, after he's come out as gay to his parents, Simon says to his father, I'm sorry I didn't turn out to be a very good boy.
Yeah.
And it broke my heart, but that's exactly the kind of fear that I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think we often see that surmises the fear that we as young gay men have coming out to our fathers specifically. And the response that the father gave in the book was something that to this very day, I think, well, probably not right now, but makes me cry. Hopefully not right now. It makes me cry a little bit, because he says something to the effect of, he's like, what are you talking about? You're an awesome boy. You're a perfect boy. You're like a ninja.
Yes.
And I just love it so much.
Well, I'll play a little bit on the flip side of that. Okay. For a girl coming out to her father, saying I'm a lesbian, or I'm interested in women, or I have a girlfriend. Let's just leave it at that. Okay. I have a girlfriend. It's the response that I thought I was going to get, which I've heard before, is, well, I'll never be able to walk my daughter down the aisle, which is very different now. But even though it's completely legal, they're still going to be thinking the same thing. It's that idea of walking your daughter down to the aisle to hand her over to the next man who's going to take care of her like you have your whole life. So something you never thought about before.
No, it's really not. And and we all have our own unique perspective. And
absolutely. Yes.
And I think that's why it's so good to be aware of your own struggles, but also to be open to learning about the struggles of other people, because we're not all exactly the same. We have similar stories and similar struggles, but we're not all the same.
Yeah. Well, we talk about all the things, like we empathize with him, like, having that taken away from him, the whole coming out thing, like how hard that must be. Some other people might not view it that way. They might be like, that's not a big deal. I don't care who outed me, whatever. But to a majority of us, I would think it's a big deal. But again, everybody's opinion is different.
Exactly.
But it's nice to know other people's stories so that you know. you can know that you're not alone.
Exactly. You are 1000% correct. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about some resolution, or let's start talking about a little bit of resolution to this problem.
Yes.
According to BuzzFeed News, several people involved in the case advised that the alleged perpetrator was eventually apprehended in July of 2016, but not as a result of investigations into Max's case. He was, the man was arrested because he threatened to set off a bomb in a local supermarket.
Why did that make me laugh when I read it too?
Do you think they were out of toilet paper? I mean...
Oh, it must be.
Must be. Clearly, we're not dealing with a stable individual. He's just effed up in general, right? All right. He was apparently, he was arrested, and then he was identified as the man who had allegedly been harassing Max and a few other people that we've learned about, but they weren't named as part of the investigation. However, after a few hours in custody, he was reportedly released. Though specific details of the case against him differ, documents obtained by BuzzFeed News outline a lengthy list of accusations on the charge sheet of the Bremen Municipal Court. And I'm sorry, did you have something to say, Ashley?
How long was it? Because I know I had it written down, but now I can't find it. But it was an absurd amount of time that they had him.
Oh, it was like 3 hours. It was a very short period of time.
What is this? Why? Like, not, okay, you found out that he is stalking multiple people and basically terrorizing one in particular. And if I'm going to bet that, if he's doing it to him, he's probably doing things of that nature to his other victims.
Absolutely.
But you threatened to bomb a grocery store, which has, now it's less than 30 people inside, but typically there's like quite a few people inside. Yeah. And those are perfect strangers. You're not just someone who gets obsessed with teenage boys and stalks them and does weird things like that. You're now like threatening anyone in society is what I feel,
I don't know what German law is specifically. Maybe there's something, maybe there's something specific to that country where he was able to be released. Maybe he was bonded out. Who knows? I do know that ultimately he was charged, and it's still an ongoing case. It's still an ongoing investigation. So I don't think he's going to get away with these crimes completely. But as far as like that specific day, he was in custody. He was incarcerated, no time whatsoever. I can't remember specifically either. I didn't include it in my notes, but I think it was something like 3 hours max.
It also kind of makes you wonder which family member of his is a police officer over there.
Exactly. Or a lawyer, a district attorney, some sort of politician.
A paralegal even.
Who knows who?
Yeah.
Totally. So, but like we were saying, he was actually charged, and it's still an open case. It's still an open investigation. And the charges would include breach of public peace. So I guess that has to do with the grocery store specifically.
I would think so.
Yeah. Abuse of emergency calls, which clearly has to do with something that we don't have information about. Defamation and libel, which I think would be included in what was happening to Max and all of the other harassment I think that was taking place with some of the other victims. Threats, robbery, extortion, and fraud, which based on everything that we know about what happened to Max, I think those are some of the charges that are lumped into that whole situation. I'm
wondering if the abuse of like the 911, emergency calls. Oh my God, my nail polish just popped right off. That's crazy. Anyways.
Do we need to make an emergency call? Should I call someone?
That would. No, but part of me wonders if, how he was sending in like the obituary letters, like the newspapers and stuff. Yeah. So perhaps maybe he was doing something like calling the emergency lines and saying that these kids were, being hurt or something had happened to them, just so that they have to now the dispatcher now has to call and like confirm or go, figure that out. He's causing disturbance that way by just calling and being like, I'm with so-and-so, you know,
Yeah.
they're bleeding out, you know, whatever. Like that could
Yeah.
be a way.
And I also wonder,
Mm-mm.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, what a fucking nut, man.
Yeah. I also wonder if the threat to set off a bomb, if maybe he like called an emergency line and made threats in that sort of way.
Yeah, that makes sense too.
I think all are reasonable suspicions.
Sure.
Yeah. It is suspected that Max's harasser found his contact information on the queer youth network You Are Not Alone, where he was active. Isn't that sad?
Yeah, I forgot about that. I feel like I put that part out of my head because it really just kind of, you're like, come on, you're putting yourself in a safe space.
It's supposed to be a safe space, yes.
Yeah.
It's sad. Max said that on multiple occasions, he gave his number to people whom he met there or was in touch with as part of that organization. It was dumb for me to feel as though I was safe there just because I was among other gay people, Max said. According to Bastian Fink, who is the head of the local Anti-Gay Violence Protection Act, or protection group, sorry, quote, these attacks, especially in the case of gay people, often take place in spaces that are actually thought of as safe. Perpetrators deliberately invade social spaces believed to be safe, such as dating sites, cruising areas, or bars. They flirt with or befriend potential victims and then blackmail them or attack them.
Yeah, I do. I remember reading that whole part now, and I just kept thinking, like, I mean, obviously, you know what came into my head was the movie Fight Club. And I'm not saying that Tyler Durden is necessarily a terrorist, because that would mean that the movie is not a good movie. But
I loved that movie.
I love that movie. I absolutely love that movie.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying, like, I don't want to talk bad about Tyler Durden, but
yeah.
He's infiltrating these, you know, these groups because he knows these are weak people that need something. It's like he's building a cult that's not necessarily following a religion, but it's his religion, that's for sure.
They're vulnerable, they're susceptible, they're reaching out for some sort of connection. And it's not like it's a secret, the thing that they're seeking out. If you are part of like an LGBTQIA plus like support group, you obviously need someone to be accepting of that and accepting of you in that way. So he automatically knows the things that he needs to do and say in order to be attractive to that person, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll talk about a little bit of resolution.
Yes.
What happened? What happened?
What had happened?
What had happened was, for 3 years, Max has been waiting for the suspect to appear before court. So they've not actually gone to trial yet, but he has been charged. And I guess ongoing investigation has taken the last 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah. By now, Max, excuse me. I'm sorry. We're not supposed to clear our throats or anything like that on this podcast. Yeah. By now, Max said he's positive he knows who the man is. A gentleman, and again, he's not a gentleman, but Ashley and I have a tendency to do that.
We do.
A person who's in his early 30s from Max's hometown who had intentionally targeted him for a, quote, harassment campaign. Even though the alleged perpetrator was always close by, no one was able to stop him. Now, it still isn't clear as to when the man will actually stand trial. Max's case exemplifies how difficult it is to escape an aggressive stalker, especially on the internet, and how powerful anti-gay persecution is in Germany, and also how long it takes for victims to finally see any sort of justice.
Quite honestly, sorry, because I'm going to forget. It's quite honestly, I read this article around the same time that we decided to rent and watch Invisible Man, the remake that just came out. And it was just this time of like, I'm like, man, I've never been in a relationship like that or had a stalker like that, like where you just felt like you cannot get out from underneath it. Like I can't imagine how suffocating that must be.
I'm surprised that a snack like you hasn't had a stalker.
I mean, I've had people fuck with me pretty hard. And I have some people that still, make fake profiles just to look at what I'm doing, but
Yeah.
not in the sense of like, they're gonna, terrorize me by putting out flyers and fucking threatening to bomb grocery stores.
I mean, without going into just a ton of detail, I've had two. I had a female stalker in high school who I had to get a restraining order against.
I've almost gotten to that, but I think the threat of that was enough, knowing that I am friends with feds and I could do it like that kind of thing. Anyway, sorry, go on. And
no,
the
you're
second
fine.
one?
And actually, shortly after I moved to the Cincinnati area, a guy that I dated for a short period of time, and it turned out to be an awful situation. We've actually kind of discussed him before.
Yeah.
He was the bisexual guy that like it just did not work out. Yeah. After I told him this is not cool with me, I'm not going to pursue this any further. He stalked me for a pretty good while, and I mean, like, I work very early. Like my shifts start at 7 a.m., but I have an hour commute to work. So I would get up and like be in my car on the way to work at like 5:30 in the morning sometimes. So this is oftentimes before the sun had risen, and I would walk out into like, not the night, but like the early morning hours where it's dark and creepy. And there would be notes from him on my car saying things like, "It's good to see you."
Oh no!
Yes. Oh. So yeah, been there, haven't experienced, I mean, I experienced some of the things that Max described, but haven't experienced all of them. But yeah, stalking is no joke, and kudos to the victims who have to deal with it for months, weeks, years even. They need all the help and support
there's
they
nothing
can get.
Well, feeling like there's nothing you can do. There's clearly, I mean, come on, this kid's parents hired a private investigator. Who how many people can afford to do that? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I certainly couldn't have, but I didn't need to. I knew who.
Yeah, right. That's very true. Yeah. It's never been a complete stranger before.
Yeah, never been a complete stranger. All right, so today, Max is 20 years old, and he's applying to university abroad. So he's trying to get the F out of Germany. Good for him.
You know what? I don't blame him. I do not blame him at all.
One bit. He still uses Facebook and WhatsApp to talk to his friends and family online, but his social media channels also remind him of a past that he tries to put behind him. He states that there are places where this all happened to him, and they're still there. The spokesperson for the Municipal Court of Bremen was not able to comment on when there will be a trial and whether or not the trial will be public. Max himself has reportedly said that not even he knows when these things will happen and where the case is going to go from here. All he knows is that the guy's been charged, right?
Well, one thing I wanted to note when you're talking about that is BuzzFeed had mentioned that not even the lawyers would talk about it. No one at the school would talk about it. Like they went to his high school, and basically I think it was something to the effect of like the receptionist or someone just kind of slid a note saying, no one here is willing or able to talk about this case.
Yeah.
Basically is all they got. And I'm like, man, what is the deal?
I understand.
Who is this guy?
Well, I also understand some of the restrictions because, I mean, even being, Slay Queens and true crime fans and whatnot, we know that people don't like to talk about ongoing investigations because they don't want to jeopardize them. And we know that people even go further to not disclose details of anything that involves people who are underage.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, so maybe that has something to do with it, but I agree. It also sounds far shadier than that because seemingly there's been no progression forward in 3+ years.
Honestly.
Why?
Who is this guy? That's the thing. Like there has to be something that he knows about someone, or he's related to someone, or something's going on. Like I just need to, I'm going to keep a close eye on this one too.
Or maybe it's just the simple sad fact that, like we established, in Germany, they just don't care about this demographic of people when they're victimized as much as they should. So maybe it's that lack of caring. Yeah.
Well, we're both total conspiracy theorists. So we do, one of us has to like reel it in sometimes and say, hey, maybe it's just that they just don't give a shit because we do see that. So you're right. You're right.
Or maybe it's a combination of the two things.
Could be.
I think the world is a shitty place sometimes. So especially now.
Oh my God, I know. It's crazy. Like,
Yeah.
I go out once a week and I don't even leave the car, but it
Yeah.
just looks ominous out there.
Yeah. All right, so let's finish up talking about Max. He
Yes.
says that he doesn't know what's going to happen or how this is going to move forward, but he says he's waiting. He's waiting until he can finally put it all behind him. Sometimes he imagines how he would behave in a courtroom, whether or not he'd be vulnerable or if he would be strong. Max said, I want to show him what he did, but I also want to show him that he didn't achieve his goal, that I am still here and I am surviving, which fucking kudos to you, man. Like, applause.
A round of, if you will.
Round of applause, yes.
I would stand up, but I'm wearing sweatpants. So
I would stand up, but I'm in my underwear.
I figured it was gonna be that or like nothing.
I'm really not. I'm wearing sweatpants, but I thought about we won't go any further with that. Yeah.
It's quarantine. Who needs to wear? Oh, I was gonna even say, like, there have only been two things this quarantine, like 2 events that have gotten me to actually put makeup on my face. One of them being Sierra's birthday. We did like, an at-home, date night and got all dressed up. And the other one is the Slay Queens podcast.
What privilege.
What privilege. You just don't want to see this without anything on it. It's a little scary.
Well, yeah, I mean, I do still have to go to work, so I try to make myself presentable for that. But usually when I'm just kicking around the house, I don't even attempt to like get this wig under control. And I've done it for you all today. So
oh yeah, you should see Sierra's hair. Yeah, it looks wonderful. I'm loving this like longer look on you though.
Yeah, not everybody sees me as often as you see me. So I normally have a much shorter fade. I have a skin fade that goes up pretty high. And now because
we didn't time this right.
Yeah. Now because of the apocalypse, it's a bit longer.
People are getting to see you with long hair and me with real bad roots. I don't know. We didn't plan. We didn't plan the video thing at the right time. But that's okay.
Natural. That's okay. We're working it out.
I don't have lash extensions.
I love the makeup. The makeup is looking gorgeous today, darling.
Well, thank you.
All right, that is all I have with regard to Max. Do you have anything else you would like to add?
No, that's the one thing that I kind of like added at the end of mine was that last kind of quote about how he just wanted to show him what he did and that he's still surviving, basically, is how they kind of ended that article, that Max is still here and still surviving. And I'm like, it's beautiful and poetic and also kind of sad at the same time. So it's like, he's just surviving, I hope he's flourishing.
I hope
you are.
Flourishing. Yeah. He'll likely be flourishing when he gets out of Germany is what it sounds like.
Yeah, I think so. I think he just needs to get the F out. And I'm glad that he has the means to do so.
Yeah, as am I. But yeah, we'll keep an eye on any developments in this case, and maybe we can do a follow-up at some point in time, because I would also love to know how this turns out.
Totally. I've got like this running list of these small little cases that we've talked about and wanting to know what's going to happen with them.
Yeah. All right. So I think that brings us to the time, Ashley.
That is the mic drop time.
The mic drop time. We do want to thank everybody for joining us again today. Thank you, queens, kings, and folks, for joining us again for the Slay Queen podcast. If this is your first time listening, please go back and listen to our other episodes. We only have one other video that's available, but it is available on YouTube. And we are Slay Queens Pod or Slay Queens Podcast everywhere. We are on YouTube, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. And you can find us or stream us just about anywhere at this point as well. So we thank you all for seeking us out. And we would also love them to do what on Apple Podcasts, Ashley?
Please rate and review, show us love and praises, and constructive criticism is great.
Constructive being the ideal situation, and 5 stars, please, everybody. But that's all I've got, I think. So go out and slay, queens.
Just not each other.
I love that you did that. Just not each other. Bye.